She gave her last meal to a man freezing outside her diner, not knowing he'd return as a Korean Mafia boss to change her life forever. The blizzard hit Chicago on January 15th, 2023, with the kind of fury that made people believe in divine anger. Wind chill dropped to -30. The city shut down, and Kira Washington stood behind the counter of Rosie's Diner at 2 a.m., watching snow pile against the windows like the world was trying to bury them alive. "We should close," her coworker Danny said, wiping down tables that hadn't seen customers in 3 hours. "Nobody's crazy enough to be out in this." "Boss said stay open till 4, Kira replied, refilling salt shakers because idle hands made her anxious. At 26, she'd learned that life didn't care about shuds. It cared about bills. Rent was due in 2 weeks, her student loans were suffocating her, and her mother's medical expenses weren't going to pay themselves. So she stayed. That's when she saw him through the window, a figure stumbling through the snow, hunched against wind that could strip flesh from bone. No coat, just a thin hoodie soaked through, jeans that looked frozen solid, shoes that had given up, pretending to be waterproof. He collapsed against the diner's door, sliding down the glass like his legs had forgotten how to hold him. "Don't," Danny warned as Kira moved toward the door. "Could be dangerous. Could be on drugs. Could be dying," Kira finished, already unlocking the door. The cold hit her like a physical blow as she pulled the man inside. He was young, maybe late 20s, Asian, Korean, she'd guess from features she'd learned to recognize in her diverse Chicago neighborhood. His lips were blue, his hands were the color of old newspaper, and when his eyes fluttered open, they were the darkest brown she'd ever seen, currently glazed with hypothermia. "Actively dying," Kira muttered, stripping off the man's frozen hoodie with hands that knew efficiency from 6 years of waitressing. "He's got hypothermia." She grabbed every blanket from the storage closet, the industrial dryer's warmth, towels heated in the kitchen, wrapped him like a burrito while Danny brought hot water. Not too hot, she remembered from some long-ago first aid class. Or you'd shock the system. The man's eyes focused on her gradually. He tried to speak, but his jaw was shaking too hard. Kira did what she did best. She fed him, started with warm broth, spooned carefully between chattering teeth, then moved to hot chocolate, the cheap diner kind that was mostly sugar and nostalgia. Gradually, color returned to his face. The shaking became less violent. "Thank you," he finally managed, voice rough and accented. I got lost. Phone died." "Shh," Kira said, the same tone she used on her younger siblings when they were scared. "You're safe now." His eyes met hers, and even through the haze of hypothermia, there was something intense about his gaze. "Kira, you got family we can call?" Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or fear. No. Over the next hour, as the storm raged outside, Kira kept Jin alive. Fed him scrambled eggs and toast, poured coffee with enough cream and sugar to make it palatable, brought him apple pie because comfort food was medicine too. She didn't ask why he'd been out there, didn't question the expensive watch on his wrist that contradicted his lack of winter coat, didn't comment on the scars she glimpsed when adjusting his blankets, old wounds that spoke of violence. Jin asked as dawn approached and the storm finally began to ease. His English was good, accent present but not heavy. Kira shrugged, refilling his coffee. "Because you needed help. Most people wouldn't open their door." "Someone like you?" She raised an eyebrow. "Then most people are assholes." He smiled then, just a small curve of lips, but it transformed his face from severe to almost beautiful. He read her name tag. "I'm not unusual, I'm just decent." 47 for everything she'd fed him. "But I do have to charge you." Jin stared at the check, then at her. "I don't have my wallet. I lost it." No, Kira had suspected as much. She pulled out her own wallet, counted out $30 from her tip money she needed, money that represented groceries or a tiny cushion against disaster. "Consider it a loan. Pay me back someday if you want. Or don't. Just..." Jin's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. His eyes were fierce, burning with something she couldn't name. "I will repay you, I swear it." It's $30 and some eggs, not a kidney, Kira joked. But something about his intensity made her shiver. I owe you everything, he said quietly. You saved my life tonight. Before she could respond, he was standing, steadier now, wrapped in blankets he'd somehow make look dignified. He pressed his watch into her hand, the expensive one she'd noticed. Until I return. His eyes held hers. I need you to have something of value. And then he was gone, walking into the dying storm with borrowed blankets and determination in his stride. Kira stared at the watch in her hand, a Patek Philippe she'd learned later, worth more than her annual salary. And she wondered who Jin Kwan really was and why he'd been out there in the first place, and if she'd ever see him again. 2 years. 730 days. That's how long it took for Jin Kwan to walk back through Rosie's diner doors. Kira was wiping down table 6, same table where she'd fed him eggs and hope, when the bell chimed. She looked up automatically, service mile ready, and froze. He looked nothing like the half-frozen boy she'd saved. This man wore a suit that cost more than her car, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, emphasizing broad shoulders and a lean, powerful build. His hair was styled, not hanging wet and frozen. His face had lost the softness of near death, replacing it with sharp angles and harder edges. But the eyes, those dark brown eyes were exactly the same. The name came out as a whisper. He smiled and the diner disappeared. Suddenly, it was just the two of them, standing across time and transformation. Hello, Kira. She dropped her rag. Her hands were shaking. That was 2 years ago. I sold your watch. He crossed the diner in 3 strides. I've been watching, making sure you were okay, that you used the money for good things. He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Alarm bells rang in Kira's head. That's... His voice dropped lower. Kira, I need to tell you who I am, what I am. He took a breath. Kira reached for her phone, but Jin's hand covered hers, not restraining, just touching. The contact sent electricity up her arm. Please, 5 minutes. Let me explain. And then if you want me to leave, I will. Something in his eyes, desperation, hope, honesty, made her nod. 5 minutes. Table 6. They sat across from each other, exactly like that night. Jin folded his hands on the table, and Kira noticed the scars more clearly now. Old knife wounds, burn marks, the hands of someone who'd survived violence. My name is Jin Kwan, he began. I'm 28 years old, and I run the Kwan family operations in the Midwest. Kira's laugh was automatic, disbelieving. The Mafia, right. Jin pulled out his phone, showed her a news article. See this? That's the sanitized version. The real story is that I control gambling, protection, and smuggling operations across 6 states. I employ 300 people. I make decisions that affect thousands of lives. The pieces clicked together horribly. The expensive watch, the scars, the way he'd been dressed that night, running, not walking, lost, not wandering. They did kill me, or thought they did, shot me, threw me in the Chicago River in January. His eyes held hers. You fed me, gave me warmth, asked for nothing. Anyone would have. No, they wouldn't. I've lived in a world of transactions my entire life. Everything costs. Everything is leverage. He leaned forward. Do you know what that meant to me? A man who'd just been betrayed by people I trusted, left to die by my own blood? Kira's mind was reeling. Okay, so you're a gangster. Great. Why are you here? To recruit me? Threaten me? Jin pulled an envelope from his jacket. Inside was a check. Kira stared at the numbers, certain she was reading them wrong. $50,000. This is... No, it's not charity. It's payment for services rendered. You saved my life. Insult me with Jin. This is insane. You gave me hope when I had none. You reminded me that not everyone in this world is corrupt or cruel. He stopped, jaw working like the next words were difficult. You made me want to be better than I was. Better than my father raised me to be. Kira pushed the check back across the table. I don't want your money. I know. He pushed it back. Please. They stared at each other, the check between them like a border. Finally, Kira said, "If I take this, we're even. Your debt is paid." Jin's voice dropped to something raw, vulnerable. "I don't want to be even. I don't want to stop thinking about you. Kira, I came back for two reasons. To repay my debt, yes." He took a breath like a man about to jump off a cliff. "Also to ask if you'd have dinner with me. A real dinner, not diner food. Let me take you somewhere nice." Kira's heart was pounding. "You want to date me?" "I want to date Kira Washington, the woman kind enough to help a stranger, smart enough to survive in a city that eats the weak." The words came automatically, years of being overlooked, making them reflex. Jin's eyes never wavered. "And I've spent 2 years thinking about what I'd say if I survived long enough to see you again. So please, Kira, one date. If you hate it, I'll walk away forever." Every alarm in Kira's head was screaming. He was a criminal, a gangster, dangerous. This was a terrible idea, and yet, one date, she heard herself say. But somewhere normal. No fancy restaurants where I'll feel out of place. And you tell me everything. Who you really are, what you really do. Jin's smile could have lit the city. "Deal. Tomorrow night." "I told you." At her expression, he had the grace to look embarrassed. "I know it sounds creepy, but Kiara, after what you did for me, I needed to know you were okay." "Noted. I'll do better." He stood, and Kiara realized how much presence he commanded. This wasn't the half-dead boy she'd saved. This was a man who'd clawed his way back from death and built an empire. "Thank you, Kira." He left, and Kira stared at the check on the table. $50,000. Enough to wipe out her mother's medical debt. Enough to pay off her car. Enough to finally breathe. She picked it up with shaking hands, then noticed something written on the back in elegant script. "For the kindest person I've ever met, you saved more than my life that night." Her coworker Shanice appeared, eyes wide. "He's dangerous," Kira said quietly. Shanice grinned. "But did you see the way he looked at you? Like you were the sun and he'd been living in darkness." "That's not danger." Jin picked her up at exactly 7 p.m. in a car that turned heads on her block. A sleek black Genesis G90 that probably cost more than her parents' house. But he got out and opened her door himself. No driver, no bodyguards visible. "You look beautiful," he said, and the way he said it made Kira believe it. She'd chosen a simple black dress, the nice one she saved for job interviews and funerals, paired with the only heels she owned that didn't hurt. Nothing fancy, but Jin looked at her like she was wearing diamonds. "So do you," she said, because he did. Dark jeans, a fitted button-down, leather jacket, casual but expensive, effortlessly handsome. Kira asked as they drove through Chicago's streets. "Somewhere I think you'll like. Normal, like you requested." He glanced at her, small smile playing on his lips. "I probably shouldn't." They ended up in Pilsen at a small Mexican restaurant Kira had heard about but never visited. The kind of place with mismatched chairs and papel picado hanging from the ceiling and the smell of fresh tortillas making your mouth water. Nothing fancy, everything perfect. Kira asked as they were seated in a corner booth. "That I'd love this. That fancy restaurants make me uncomfortable." Jin's expression turned sheepish. "I might have done more research than just watching from a distance. Your Instagram mentioned loving Mexican food. Your friend Shanice posted about this place. And I remembered that night. You fed me diner food, not anything pretentious." At her look, he laughed. "I'm sorry, I'm not good at this. Normal dating. In my world, everything is strategic, calculated." "Start by being honest," Kira said. "You promised. Everything." So Jin told her about growing up in Seoul until he was 10, when his father moved the family to Chicago, about watching his father build a criminal empire from nothing, using fear and loyalty in equal measure, about being groomed from childhood to take over, learning violence before algebra, about his sister who died in crossfire when he was 16, collateral damage in a war she didn't understand. "That's when I stopped feeling," Jin said quietly. "When Mi Young died, I built walls so high nothing could hurt me again. Became exactly what my father wanted. Ruthless, cold, efficient." Kira asked. He met her eyes. Not all the way out. That's impossible. You don't leave this life. But I wanted to shift things, move toward legitimate business, stop the protection rackets that hurt small business owners, end the violence. My lieutenants thought I was weak, betraying my father's legacy. Jin reached across the table, not quite touching her hand. After I left your diner, I spent 3 months recovering in secret. Then I came back, eliminated everyone involved in the coup, and restructured everything. Made it clear that the old ways were dying. It means every decision I made, I asked myself, what would Kira do? Would she approve? He smiled wryly. You became my conscience. I know, and I'm sorry, but Kira, you have to understand. I was ready to die that night, had accepted it. Then you opened your door and fed me and treated me like I mattered, and suddenly I wanted to live. The food arrived. Tamales, enchiladas, street tacos, enough for a small army. They ate and talked, and gradually the conversation shifted away from darkness. Kira told him about growing up in Chicago, the youngest of 4 siblings, about her mother's breast cancer diagnosis 3 years ago, about dropping out of nursing school to work full-time when the medical bills became overwhelming. Jin asked, Still do, someday. Kira shrugged. But right now, the diner pays bills. Jin pulled out his phone, showed her a building. I own this property. It's empty right now, but I've been thinking about opening a community health clinic. Affordable care for people who fall through the cracks. I need someone to run it. Kira stared at him. I'm offering you a chance to finish your dream. I'll pay for you to complete nursing school. Full ride, no strings. And when you graduate, if you want to work at the clinic, the position is yours. Because you spent $30 you couldn't afford to save a stranger. Because you put someone else's needs ahead of your own without hesitation. He leaned forward. Tears burned Kira's eyes. This is too much. The money, the job offer, all of it. Jin's voice was soft, urgent. That's what tonight is about. And tomorrow night, if you'll give me another chance. And the night after that. Let me prove I'm not just some criminal trying to buy your affection. They dated in secret for 3 months. Secret because Kira wasn't ready to explain to her family and friends that she was seeing a Korean gangster. Secret because Jin's world was dangerous, and the fewer people who knew about her, the safer she'd be. Secret because what they were building felt fragile, precious, something that needed darkness to take root. Jin was unlike anyone Kira had ever known. He remembered everything she said, her coffee order, her favorite color, the names of her nieces and nephews. Showed up at the diner during her breaks with food that wasn't from the menu, Korean fried chicken, homemade kimbap, sweets from bakeries she'd never heard of. Sent flowers to her apartment with notes written in a mix of English and Korean that she'd translated, discovering they were poetry. But he also disappeared sometimes, would cancel dates last minute with cryptic apologies. Came to pick her up once with bruised knuckles he wouldn't explain. Took phone calls in Korean that made his expression go cold and dangerous, reminding her exactly what he was. This isn't sustainable, Kira told him one night, 2 months in. They were in his penthouse apartment. Modern, minimalist, expensive in a way that made her uncomfortable. The secrets, the disappearances. Jin, I like you. More than I should. He pulled her close, and Kira let herself sink into his warmth. But Kira, introducing you to my world means putting you at risk. My enemies would see you as leverage. The admission came out raw, and that terrifies me, because I've lost everyone I've ever cared about. My mother, my sister, my father. Everyone close to me ends up dead or destroyed. I can't. Kira pulled back to look at him, really look at him. This man who commanded an empire but looked at her like she was the source of all light. You don't get to make that decision alone. I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting. I survived the south side of Chicago. I kept my family together through my mother's cancer. I saved your ass from hypothermia. Then explain it to me. Show me your world. Jin was quiet for a long moment. Then, okay, tomorrow night, I'll show you exactly what my life looks like. But Kira, promise me something. If it's too much, if you want out, you tell me immediately. No trying to be brave. No sacrificing yourself for my sake. The next night, Jin took her to a warehouse in an industrial part of the city. The building was nondescript from outside, but inside was a different world. Men in suits speaking Korean and English. Tables covered in account books and computers. The air thick with cigarette smoke and tension. This is headquarters, Jin explained, hand at the small of Kira's back as he guided her through, where we coordinate operations. He didn't shy away from the truth, showed her everything. People bowed as they passed. Eyed Kira with curiosity and in some cases barely concealed hostility. She was an outsider, a black woman in a Korean organization. Someone who didn't belong. This is Kira, Jin announced in a conference room full of his lieutenants. She's important to me, which means she's under my protection. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. The men nodded, but Kira saw the doubt in their eyes, the calculation. She was a liability in their world, a distraction, something that made their boss weak. After the tour, Jin took her to his office, poured them both whiskey, and waited. He finally asked. He moved to the window overlooking the city. What you saw tonight, that's the sanitized version. I didn't show you the violence. The enforcers who break bones for late payments. The protection rackets that bleed small businesses dry. He turned to face her. I'm trying to change things. Move legitimate. But it takes time, and people resist change, which means violence. Blood. Kira stood, crossed to him, put her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat, quick, anxious. I'm not naive. I know what you are, what you do. And yes, it scares me. The danger, the moral ambiguity, all of it. His eyes widened. Because the hospital suddenly classified her as a research patient with full coverage. And when I pressed, they said it was arranged by a Korean American foundation that doesn't show up in any search. She smiled. I don't. I feel grateful and confused and terrified. She took a breath. And in love with you, which is absolutely insane because we've only been dating 3 months and you're a criminal and this violates every ounce of common sense I have. But there it is. Jin's expression cracked open. I love you, you idiot. And I know it's too soon and too crazy. And he kissed her, pulled her against him, and kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jin pressed his forehead to hers. I fell in love with you the moment you fed me eggs and refused payment. He smiled, then turned serious. But Kira, loving me means accepting danger. I have enemies and people who'd hurt you to hurt me. I can give you security, bodyguards, protection. Nobody's ever safe. Kira thought of her mother's cancer, of friends lost to street violence, of all the ways the world broke people without warning. At least with you, I'd be loved while facing the danger. I deserve you, and you deserve me. They made it work through compromise and communication, and on Kira's part, a crash course in Korean customs and language. Jin hired a tutor, insisted she learn at least conversational Korean so she'd understand what was happening around her, introduced her slowly to his inner circle, making it clear she wasn't just a girlfriend, but someone with permanent status. The Korean community had mixed reactions. Some of the older generation disapproved. A black woman with their most prominent leader was scandalous. But others, especially those who'd benefited from Jin's increasing legitimacy and community investment, were cautiously welcoming. And when Kira started volunteering at the Korean Community Center, teaching first aid classes and helping with health outreach, opinions began to shift. You're winning them over, Jin said 6 months into their relationship, watching her interact easily with grandmothers at the center. I'm not trying to win anyone over. Kira smiled at an elderly woman who just complimented her Korean, still rough but improving. But it helps that I actually care about the community. I know. Jin pulled her close, not caring who saw. But not everyone was won over. Some of Jin's men resented the changes he'd implemented since meeting Kira. The shift toward legitimate business meant less money from protection rackets. His new focus on community investment felt like weakness, and there were whispers, always whispers, that the boss had gone soft. The threat came on a Tuesday. Kira was leaving the diner after her shift when a black SUV pulled up. Four men got out, Korean, built like fighters, expressions cold. "Miss Washington," one said in accented English. Kira reached for her phone, but one of the men grabbed her wrist. Not violent, but firm. A warning. They drove her to a restaurant in Koreatown, high-end with private rooms. Inside, an older Korean man waited. Expensive suit, cold eyes, the air of someone used to absolute authority. "Miss Washington," he said, gesturing to a seat. "I'm Park Min-ho." Kira's blood ran cold. Legally speaking, I faked my death 5 years ago to test my son." Park's smile didn't reach his eyes. "He's done well, built the empire beyond my expectations. I don't know what you think I've done. You've made him weak, distracted." Park leaned forward. "You're a complication, Miss Washington." Fear spiked through Kira, but she kept her voice steady. "If you hurt me, Jin will destroy you." Park's smile turned cruel. "I want him angry, reckless, making mistakes, because then I can remove him properly and install a successor who understands our real purpose. You're bait, Miss Washington." Before Kira could respond, her phone vibrated, a text from Jin. "Where are you?" "Tracker, right." Jin had installed tracking software on her phone with her permission for exactly this type of situation. But these men had probably jammed it, or she was in a dead zone. Either way, Jin knew something was wrong. "He's coming," Kira said with more confidence than she felt. "Let him come. This is what I want. A final confrontation." Park stood. "You'll wait here. Comfortable, unharmed, the perfect bait." They left her in the room with two guards. Kira's mind raced. She wasn't helpless. Had grown up in a neighborhood where you learned to fight or became a victim. But these were trained enforcers. She needed another option. Her hand found her necklace, a gift from Jin, a delicate silver chain with a small pendant. She'd thought it was just jewelry, but knowing Jin, paranoid and protective Jin, maybe it was more. She clicked the pendant 3 times fast. Nothing happened. Then her phone buzzed. "Signal received. Coming." Jin arrived 20 minutes later like an avenging angel. Kira heard the commotion through the walls, shouting, gunfire, sounds of violence. Then the door burst open and Jin was there. Gun in hand, blood spattered across his face. Not his, she'd learn later. Eyes wild until they found her. He crossed the room in 2 strides, hands running over her, checking for injuries. "I'm fine, but Jin, your father, I know. He called me, told me everything." Jin's jaw clenched. They found Park in the main dining room, sitting calmly despite the chaos. His guards were down, Jin's men securing the building. It was just father and son, facing each other across blood and broken glass. "You came," Park said, even knowing it was a trap. Jin kept Kira behind him, protected. "Something you never understood. Fear is loyalty, fear is respect. Your mother never understood that either." Jin's voice went deadly quiet. "You don't get to mention her after what you did." Kira's breath caught. Jin had said his mother died, never that his father murdered her. She was a liability. Park gestured to Kira. "You think I won't kill her too? Think you can build some fantasy life with a black waitress while running our empire?" "No," Jin raised his gun, aimed at his father's head. "Done with your legacy. Done with your version of our family. Done pretending I need your approval. You're dead to me. Have been since you killed Mom." "You won't do it?" "You're right." Jin lowered the gun slightly. "Too weak to become you. To let this life destroy everyone I love." He turned to Kira. "We're leaving, tonight. All of this. The organization, the business, everything." "You can't walk away," Park snarled. Jin pulled Kira toward the exit. "I'm leaving everything to you, father. The empire you value more than family, more than life." They almost made it to the door before Park moved. Gun appearing from nowhere, aimed not at Jin, but at Kira. Everything happened in slow motion. Jin turning, pushing Kira down. The gunshot echoing, blood blooming across Jin's shoulder as he took the bullet meant for her. And then Jin's own gun firing, once, Twice, 3 times. Park fell. Jin's father, his last remaining parent, crumpling like a puppet with cut strings, dead before hitting the ground. Kira scrambled to him, hands pressing against his shoulder wound. Oh God, you're shot. We need to. I'm fine. Okashike. He was already standing, pulling her up. We have to go. Now. His men materialized, securing the scene, arranging cover stories. Jin's second in command, a man named Kim, approached. Boss? Promote internally, sell off the illegal operations, keep the legitimate businesses, use profits for community investment. Jin's eyes were hard, and if anyone has a problem with that, they can leave. Kim asked quietly. I'm out, effective immediately. Keep a small percentage for my silence and goodwill. They drove to Jin's penthouse in silence, Kira holding pressure on his wound, mind reeling. Inside, she cleaned and bandaged him with hands that had steadied from shock into competence. The bullet had gone clean through, painful but not fatal. You killed your father, she said when she'd finished. Jin's voice was empty. He was going to kill you. Now we disappear. I have accounts overseas, properties where no one knows us. We can start over. New names, new lives. Kira stared at him. You'd give up everything for me? You gave me $30 you couldn't afford and asked for nothing in return. You taught me that kindness exists. Jin took her hands. That check I gave you 2 years ago? I said I was repaying a debt. But Kira, I'll never be able to repay what you really gave me. The belief that I could be better. What about my family? My mother? My siblings? They'll be taken care of, anonymously but completely. Medical care, education, housing, everything. They'll think you got a job overseas. We'll send photos, letters. I've been planning this for months. Jin smiled sadly. Kira was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Her entire life upended in one night. I barely know you. Kira met his eyes. Not fear for my life, not regret. I love you. I love you despite every logical reason not to. Despite the danger and the complications and the absolute insanity of this situation. I love you because you're trying to be better, because you looked at a waitress and saw someone worth saving. She squeezed his hands. So yes, let's disappear. Let's build something new. Jin pulled her into a kiss that tasted like blood and hope and impossible futures. We'll go to Seoul first, he murmured against her lips. Then maybe Jeju Island. Find a small house by the ocean. I'll teach you Korean properly. You can finish nursing school there. Work at a local clinic. No, but we'll be together. They left Chicago 3 days later, after Jin had arranged everything with meticulous care. Kira said goodbye to her family with carefully constructed lies. A nursing program in Seoul, a fellowship she couldn't refuse. Her mother hugged her tight and whispered, I know there's a man involved. There's always a man when a woman's eyes look like yours. They flew first class to Seoul, then took a smaller plane to Jeju Island. And the house Jin had bought was perfect. Small but comfortable, overlooking the ocean, far from the chaos they'd left behind. Kira stood on the porch that first night, breathing salt air and freedom, feeling Jin's arms wrap around her from behind. He asked, Thousands. She leaned back against him. Tell me about the island. Beautiful, peaceful. They have excellent hospitals if you want to continue nursing school. Strong community. He turned her to face him. Kira, I know this isn't the life you imagined. No, I've taken you away from everything familiar. She smiled. I'll have bad days. Miss my family. Wonder if we made the right choice. That's human. But Jin, I chose this. Chose you. Chose us. Old habits. Everyone I've ever loved has left or died or betrayed me. I can do patient. Jin pulled her closer. Thank you for seeing past who I was to who I'm trying to become. For giving me a reason to change. Thank you for coming back. For keeping your promise. The first year was an adjustment. Kira threw herself into learning Korean, determined to be fluent, enrolled in nursing school and discovered that her previous credits transferred beautifully. Made friends with local women who accepted her mix of broken Korean and earnest effort. Built a life that was small but real. Jin struggled more. Going from emperor to ordinary took adjustment. He got a job as a translator, his English and Korean both fluent, plus Chinese and Japanese he'd learned for business. Started volunteering at a community center, learned to cook because Kira worked odd hours, became improbably domestic. I miss it sometimes, he admitted one night after a year. They were cooking dinner together, kimchi jjigae, a recipe his mother had taught him before she died. The power, the respect. Kira stirred the pot. Jin looked around their small kitchen, at Kira in sweatpants and one of his t-shirts, hair wrapped, feet bare, at the life they'd built from nothing. No, never. She kissed him. Year 2 brought unexpected complications. Kira discovered she was pregnant. They'd been careful but not perfectly careful, and now a tiny life was growing inside her. She told Jin on a beach at sunset, hands shaking as she showed him the positive test. I know we didn't plan this, she said quickly. No, it's complicated with our situation. If you're not ready, if this is too much, Jin dropped to his knees in the sand, pressing his forehead against her stomach. Yes. He looked up, and Kira saw tears tracking down his face. My sister. When she died, I thought that was it, end of our family line. My father's violence had killed everything good in our bloodline. But Kira, you're giving me a chance to start over. To be the father my dad never was. That's a yes to everything. He stood, pulled her into his arms. Marry me, officially. Then let's make it official. It's also the only one you're getting. Yes, you idiot. They married in a small ceremony on the beach, just the two of them and a local officiant. Kira wore a simple white dress, Jin wore linen pants and a shirt. They exchanged rings made from local volcanic rock and jade. Vows spoken in Korean and English. Promises made to each other and the life growing between them. I promise to choose you every day, Kira said, in the hard times and the easy ones. When you're struggling with who you were and who you're becoming. When our child asks about their father's past and we have to figure out what to say. I promise to be worthy of your choice, Jin replied. To be the man you believed I could be, even when I didn't believe it myself. To build a life where our child knows only safety and love. To honor the kindness you showed a freezing stranger by being kind to others. Their son was born 6 months later. Healthy, screaming, perfect. They named him Daniel Jinwoo Washington Kwan, a name that bridged both their worlds. And when Kira placed him in Jin's arms for the first time, watching this dangerous man turn soft and careful with their child, she knew they'd made the right choice. Year 3. Daniel was walking, talking in both English and Korean, a tiny person with his father's eyes and his mother's smile. Kira had graduated nursing school and was working at a local clinic, beloved by patients for her gentle competence. Jin had expanded his translation business, hired 3 employees, built something legitimate and successful. They'd made friends, other international couples, locals who didn't pry into their pasts, built a community of people who accepted them for who they were now, not who they'd been. Life was good, simple, safe, until the day Kira came home from the clinic to find 3 black cars in their driveway and Kim, Jin's former second-in-command, sitting in their living room. She demanded immediately, with Jin at the park, safe. Kim stood, hands raised peacefully. I'm not here to threaten you, Mrs. Kwan. The organization, after you left, after Boss died, I tried to do what Jin wanted, go legitimate, clean things up. But there's a faction that wants the old ways back. They've seized control, and they're destroying everything Jin built, hurting people. That's not our problem anymore. I know, and I respect that. But Mrs. Kwan, they're coming after him anyway. They see him as a threat, living proof that there's another way, and they have resources to find you, even here. Fear spiked through Kira. My mother? Not hurt, not yet, but it's a matter of time. Their leverage. The new leadership wants Jin back, wants to prove he's still the ruthless leader they remember. Jin arrived home then, Daniel on his shoulders, both of them laughing until Jin saw Kim. His expression went cold, deadly. The man Kira knew disappeared, replaced by the boss he'd been. Get out. Kira touched his arm. He says my family is in danger. Jin's jaw clenched. He set Daniel down, signed for him to go to his room. Their son, bilingual in languages and sensing tension, obeyed without question. Only when the door closed did Jin speak. Tell me everything, and Kim, if you're lying, if this is some trick. No trick, boss, just desperation. I'm trying to hold things together, but I can't do it without you, without your reputation. You'll always be the boss. They spent that night arguing. Jin wanted to handle it alone, fly back to Chicago, deal with the threat, return before Kira or Daniel were endangered. Kira refused to let him go alone into danger. Kim suggested a third option. Use Jin's legend without his physical presence. Negotiate from a distance. Make it clear that going after his family meant war with a man who'd once ruled Chicago's underworld. They need to see you're still powerful, Kim argued. Still connected, still dangerous. Right now, they think you're weak, domesticated, Jin demanded. A video conference. You surrounded by everything that made you terrifying, speaking in the old language they understand. That's still putting us back in that world, Kira said. Doing nothing puts him at risk too, Jin replied quietly. They found us. That's already happened. They made the call 3 days later. Kim arranged everything. Secure connection, the warehouse in Chicago filled with Jin's former enforcers, the new leadership assembled and waiting. On the screen, Jin appeared against the backdrop of their peaceful Jeju home, but his expression was pure predator. He spoke in Korean, voice cold and precise. Kira, watching from off camera, could only understand pieces. But she heard her name, Daniel's name. Understood from context and tone that Jin was making threats so severe that grown men flinched. Jin said, switching to English, I left because I'd found something worth more than power. But make no mistake, touch my family, threaten what's mine, and I'll remind you exactly why you feared me. He leaned forward, eyes boring through the camera. Or you can accept my terms. Continue the legitimate transition I started. Leave my family alone. And I'll stay here, living my quiet life, letting you pretend you're in charge. Your choice. The call ended. Jin sat back, exhaling slowly. Kira saw his hands shaking. Adrenaline or fear, or the weight of becoming his old self even temporarily. She asked, We'll know in 72 hours. He didn't finish, didn't have to. The wait was agony. Kira couldn't eat, barely slept, jumped at every sound. Jin was worse, reverting to old patterns, checking weapons she hadn't known he still owned, making contingency plans for them to disappear deeper, further, somewhere even his former organization couldn't reach. On the third day, Kim called. They've agreed. Full terms. Your family is off limits. You're officially retired. No interference. Relief flooded through Kira so intensely she had to sit down. It's over? It's over, Kim confirmed. Boss, Jin, you're free. Completely. Jin thanked him and hung up. Looked at Kira with eyes full of exhaustion and relief and lingering fear. We're safe. Daniel's safe. Ashahai. Yes, but I didn't have to actually become one. He pulled her close. I can live with threats I never have to follow through on. I love you, Kira whispered. I love you too. Years passed. Daniel grew into a bright, curious child who spoke 3 languages and asked questions that required complex answers. Kira advanced in her nursing career, eventually becoming head nurse at the clinic. Jin's translation business thrived, providing jobs and stability for dozens of families. They visited Chicago once, 5 years after leaving. Kira's mother was in remission, healthy and vibrant. Her siblings had prospered, college educations mysteriously funded, job opportunities appearing at just the right times. The family gathered, loud and loving, and Kira felt the warmth of belonging she'd missed. Her mother asked quietly, watching Jin play with Daniel and Kira's nieces and nephews. Good, because I see how he looks at you, like you hung the moon, like he'd burn the world down for you. If only you knew, Kira thought, but smiled and said, he's a good man. They left Chicago after a week, returning to Jeju with relief. This was home now, not the city of her birth, but the place where she'd built something real with Jin, where they'd raised their son in safety, and peace. Year 8 brought a surprise. Kira's friend from nursing school tracked her down, begging for help. She'd married into a Korean family, was being abused by her husband, couldn't escape because of cultural pressure and financial dependence. Kira immediately offered sanctuary, despite Jin's concerns about drawing attention. "We have to help her," Kira insisted. "I do, which is why I also know how dangerous it is to interfere with another man's family. Then we deal with it, but I won't turn away someone who needs help." Jin studied his wife, fierce, compassionate, unwilling to compromise on her values even when it endangered them. "You're right. We help her." They brought Kira's friend, Sarah, and her 2 children to Jeju, gave them a safe place to stay, legal support, financial resources to start over. When Sarah's husband came looking, Jin met him personally. Whatever was said in that conversation, conducted in Korean, out of Kira's hearing, the man left immediately and never returned. Kira asked later, "That some women are untouchable." Jin shrugged. "I'm a man trying to be good. There's a difference." Year 10, Daniel was 9, starting to ask questions about his father's past. Where did Jin come from? Why did they live in Korea when both parents were American? Why did strange men sometimes bow to his father in restaurants? Jin and Kiara decided together. Partial truth. Enough to satisfy curiosity without burdening their son with the full weight of history. They told him that Jin's family had been involved in business, complicated business that sometimes hurt people, that Jin had chosen to leave that world to build something better, that they'd come to Jeju for a fresh start. Daniel asked in his mix of English and Korean. Jin considered the question carefully. "I did bad things, hurt people, made choices I'm not proud of. But your mother saw something good in me, something worth saving. Am I bad?" "No, Daniel. You're proof that people can change, that we're not just the sum of our worst moments." "I think Amma saved you," Daniel said simply. "Like in the stories." Kira laughed from the doorway. "I'm no princess." "A man who was lost," Kira said, pulling them both into a hug. "Who needed someone to believe in him." Year 12 brought tragedy. Kira's mother died, peacefully, in her sleep, surrounded by family. Kira flew back to Chicago for the funeral, Jin and Daniel with her. It was the first time Daniel had visited America, seen the neighborhood where his mother grew up. "It's different from Jeju," Daniel observed, looking at Chicago's south side with wide eyes. "Or don't everything." "This is where your mother learned to be strong," Jin told him, "where she developed the kindness that saved my life. Remember that when you see the poverty and struggle." At the funeral, Kira saw people from her old life, former co-workers from the diner, neighbors who remembered the girl who'd worked 3 jobs to help her family, friends who'd lost touch over the years. They looked at her now, confident, successful, clearly prosperous, and whispered about her transformation. "You did good, Key," her brother Marcus said at the reception. "Mama was so proud of you." She understood love. Kira met her brother's eyes. She knew he'd been in trouble, that we'd left to start over. "And are you happy?" "More than I ever thought possible. He's a good father, Marcus. A good husband." They returned to Jeju after 2 weeks, all 3 of them grateful to be home. Daniel started asking more questions about culture, identity, what it meant to be Korean and Black and American all at once. Jin and Kara navigated these conversations together, teaching him to take pride in all his heritages. Daniel asked. "Yes," Kira said honestly. "Some will. Some will see only one part of you and ignore the rest." "No, it's not. But Daniel, your father and I chose to be together despite everyone saying we shouldn't. Despite the world telling us our love didn't make sense. And we made you perfect, brilliant you." Truth is often cheesy. Year 15. Daniel was 14, applying to high schools, starting to think about his future. Jin's past had become exactly that. Past. The organization in Chicago ran smoothly under new leadership. Kim visited once a year, always respectfully, bringing news and maintaining connection. The threats had long since faded. Kira was 41 now, head administrator at a network of clinics she'd helped establish. Jin was 43, running a successful import-export business, actually legitimate this time, helping Korean and American businesses connect. They'd built exactly what they'd hoped for. A real life, earned honestly, hurting no one. Kira asked one night. They were sitting on their porch watching the sunset, Daniel inside doing homework. The power, the empire. Sometimes I miss the simplicity, Jin admitted, knowing exactly who I was and what I did. But then I look at what we've built, our son, our life, the person you've helped me become, and I realize I don't miss it at all. I mourn it sometimes, maybe. Mourn the parts of myself I had to kill to become someone worthy of you. But miss it? I'm proud of you. I'm alive because of you. Everything good in my life traces back to the night you opened your door and fed a freezing stranger. You saved me, Kira, not just from hypothermia. We saved each other. I was dying too, just more slowly. She took his hand. Year 20. Daniel was 19 in his second year at Seoul National University, studying international relations. Smart, thoughtful, determined to build bridges between cultures like his parents had. Jin and Kiara were empty nesters adjusting to the quiet house. They renewed their vows on their 20th anniversary back on the same beach where they'd married. This time, though, they were surrounded by the community they'd built, friends, colleagues, the families they'd helped over the years. Daniel stood as witness, tall and handsome, his father's intensity tempered by his mother's warmth. 20 years ago, Jin said in his vows, I was a different person, controlled by fear and violence, and the belief that power was all that mattered. Then you fed me eggs and coffee and asked for nothing in return. And slowly, impossibly, you taught me that kindness isn't weakness, that love isn't a liability. 20 years ago, Kira replied, you walked back into my life and refused to let me settle for less than I deserved. You believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. You gave me back my dreams and added new ones I never imagined. They kissed while their community cheered, and Kira thought about that freezing night in Chicago, about the choice to open the door, about $30 in tip money and a man who'd promised to return. He'd kept that promise, kept it every single day for 20 years. And she'd spent every day since proving she'd been right to believe in him. Year 25. Kira was 51, Jin was 53. Daniel was engaged to a wonderful woman, half Japanese, half Ethiopian, continuing the family tradition of bridging worlds. They were planning a wedding that would celebrate all their heritages. Jin had been diagnosed with early-stage prostate cancer 6 months earlier. Treatable, caught early, but a reminder of mortality. Kira, using every bit of her medical knowledge and connections, had found the best treatment. They'd faced it together, like they'd faced everything else. I'm not done yet, Jin told her after his final treatment. I have too much left to do. Watch Daniel get married, meet grandchildren. You're not going anywhere, Kira said fiercely. Hypothermia and yourself. Both times I pulled you back from the edge. Jin pulled her close. Not since this morning. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. The reason I'm alive. The reason I'm good. Year 30. Jin was in remission. 5 years clear, doctors calling it cured. Daniel had given them 3 grandchildren. Beautiful mixed heritage babies who spoke 4 languages and called them Halmeoni and Harbeoji. Kira and Jin's hair had gone gray. Bodies had slowed, but their love had only deepened. They still lived in the same house in Jeju, still watched sunsets from their porch, still told the story of how they met to anyone who asked, leaving out the mafia parts, emphasizing the kindness and choice and belief in second chances. We should go back, Jin said one evening, to Chicago. It closed years ago, remember? Then we'll go to the Starbucks, stand where table 6 used to be. They went 3 months later, making it a family trip. Daniel brought his wife and children. They stood in the Starbucks that had once been Rosie's diner, and Jin told his grandchildren the story. Your Halmeoni was working here, he said in Korean, Daniel translating for the children in English and Japanese. And I was lost, freezing, dying, really. She could have ignored me, should have, probably. Strange man, blizzard, late at night. But she opened the door, fed me, gave me money from her own pocket. The oldest grandchild asked, because she's the kindest person in the world, Jin said, Because she saw someone in need and helped. That's all. No complicated reason. The middle grandchild asked. I did. 2 years later, walked through that door right there and asked her to dinner. Kira laughed. No, I thought your Harabaji was creepy at first, following me, knowing too much about me. But he was persistent. I was not creepy, Jin protested. You were absolutely creepy. But she was smiling, 30 years of this argument making it comfortable, familiar. The children giggled, and Daniel rolled his eyes. They're always like this. That's love, Jin said seriously, being comfortable enough to disagree, knowing each other well enough to tease. They returned to Jeju that week, all of them together. The grandchildren ran on the beach while Kira and Jin watched from their porch. Daniel sat between them, the bridge they'd created. You did good, Iyama, he said quietly, building this family, this life. Your father made himself, Kira corrected. You taught me, Jin said, every day, how to be gentle, how to love without controlling, how to be strong without violence. You're my teacher, Kira. And you taught me that love is worth the risk, that broken people can heal each other. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their legacy play in the waves. 3 children who would grow up knowing they came from love, who would tell their own children about the Halmaoni who'd saved a stranger and the Harabaoji who'd spent his life becoming worthy of that kindness. Year 35. Jin was 63, Kira was 61. They'd slowed down significantly, but they were still together, still in love, still choosing each other every morning. Kira found Jin on the porch one evening looking at an old photograph, the Patek Philippe watch, the one he'd given her that first night, that she'd sold, that he'd bought back years later as a gift. It sat in a frame now, a memento of the beginning. She asked, settling beside him. Always. It's the dividing line of my life, for Kira and after Kira. I think about it too, about how close I came to not opening that door. I was tired. It was late. Danny was telling me not to. But you did open it. That's who you are, who you've always been, someone who helps when it costs you. Jin took her hand, fingers intertwining automatically. Thank you for everything, for saving me, believing in me, building this life with me, for being patient while I learned how to love without destroying, for giving me Daniel, and through him, our grandchildren. You made your life mean something. They died 2 years apart, Jin first, peacefully, at 65. Heart attack in his sleep, quick and painless, surrounded by family in their Jeju home. His last words whispered to Kira in the ambulance were in Korean, Saranghae. Kira followed at 65, exactly 2 years to the day after Jin's death. Also peaceful, also surrounded by family. Daniel held her hand as she slipped away, and her last words were, tell your father I'm coming. At their joint memorial, and they'd arranged it years earlier, wanting to be remembered together, Daniel stood before hundreds of people whose lives they'd touched. He told the story, the real story, all of it. His father's past, his mother's kindness, the choice that changed everything. My father was a criminal, Daniel said. He hurt people, built an empire on fear, lived a life he wasn't proud of. And then, one freezing night in Chicago, he stumbled into a diner where a waitress named Kira Washington was working. She fed him, gave him money she couldn't afford. 2 years later, he came back, repaid his debt with interest, and asked her for a date. She said yes. And my father spent the next 37 years becoming the man she'd seen in him that night. They weren't perfect. They fought, disagreed, drove each other crazy sometimes, but they chose each other. Every single day, they chose each other. My mother used to say that kindness is the most powerful force in the universe, that believing in someone's potential to change can make it real. My father proved her right, and together they proved that it's never too late to become better, that love really can redeem. So when you leave here today, remember their story. Remember that small acts of kindness ripple out in ways you can't predict, that feeding a stranger might save a life, that believing in someone might change everything. Daniel placed 2 urns side by side in a niche in the memorial wall. Kira and Jin together, as they'd been for 37 years. united in death as they'd been in life. The kindest person he had ever known, and the man she'd saved, not once but daily, through the simple power of believing he could be better. Years later, one of Daniel's children, named Kiera after her grandmother, asked about the photograph on the mantle, the one showing a younger Daniel's parents on a beach in Jeju, laughing, clearly in love. That's your Halmione and Haraboji, Daniel explained, on their wedding day. Because they never wanted to forget the promises they made, to choose each other, to believe in each other. Tell me the story again, young Kira asked. So Daniel told it, the story that had become family legend, the freezing stranger and the kind waitress, the 2 years of searching, the date that changed everything, the life built from impossible beginnings, the love that proved redemption was real. And as he spoke, Daniel understood what his parents had known all along, that the best stories are the ones where broken people heal each other, where kindness wins, where love, against all odds and logic and probability, creates something that endures. His mother had fed a freezing stranger. His father had kept his promise to return. Together, they'd proven that sometimes the most unlikely love stories are the ones that change everything. And that belief in someone's potential to change can make miracles real.